was my polite way of starting the meeting again. Thank you. And now we move on to Development Contributions Policy, Proposed Areas of Refinement. And I suspect Mr Goff would like to move that. And who would like to second it? Mr East, Councillor East. So is there any, do we want staff up for questions? Yep. Who's assisting us on this? Mike Teelan, Alan Bywater.
Chelsea Stewart.
Chelsea Stewart. Yep. A resident expert on development contributions.
Rapidly becoming that.
Excellent. So, Yanni.
I think 3 years ago we agreed to set up a working party around development contributions. That, for whatever reason, didn't happen. We've agreed to set up a developer forum to review the DC's policy. So I'm just really struggling to understand why this report is here now, ahead of that working party or that developer forum, actually looking at our DCs and reporting back holistically.
Effectively, the two things are sort of happening in parallel. I think the first meeting of the development forum is next week, so that is also sort of happening. I think what we were looking for here from the council was a steer. So I guess we've identified the areas in the policy we felt that needed to be reviewed, but we didn't want to get stuck into quite a lot of detailed number crunching type work around that, and without some sort of indication that the council supported that general direction for us to explore. You're not making any decisions about the end point, you're only making a decision about what we should be working on. I'm sure that will be part of the conversation with developers through that development forum as we get those meetings going.
Andrew?
I look at the table on page, or look at the list on page 50, and the thing that jumps out for me there is the big difference in dollar value between catchments. So Littleton Harbour 60,000 per Huey, and the rural areas up to 63,000. And I mean, I note the committee recommendation addresses the fact that there are maybe distinctions that we could be looking at in those rural areas between pure rural and existing urban areas such as Littleton and Akaroa within those areas. And I'm certainly keen to look at that. But to what extent, in approving this today, are we removing the opportunity to look at any other options that wouldn't see that huge difference in dollar value per Huey across the city?
Okay, you're not really removing those options. I mean, I guess the other primary option is to continue with sort of what we've got now, which is where most of the catchments are citywide. There are, I think, 3 catchments that are two types of bits of the DC where there are kind of location-specific catchments for good reasons. The rest of it's citywide. Again, you're not making the decision today to move away from a citywide approach to a finer-grained catchment approach. All you're doing is indicating you're happy for us to continue to explore that, and for you that once we've done that, for the council then to make a decision whether it wants to move that way or not.
All right. So, have I got that? Yeah. Oh, Yanni?
I had a second question, which was, if we agree to this today, what's the process for then changing it based on the feedback we get from the developers forum? Like, just to give you an example, some of us were approached by a central city developer before we did our 10 million rebate, saying that the costs were just astronomical for some of the stuff around water supply, etc. And it did seem quite hard to understand why in an urban city environment, which has had lots of density previously, they've got very high rates of DCs. So how do we incorporate feedback from the forum into the DC's policy going forward? And I guess I'm just concerned that if we send a signal in a direction today, that we're just continuing the status quo without looking at those other changes.
There's Kind of two reasons why we went down the catchments route as far as analysis. One is that the local government amendments now basically require the council to avoid district-wide catchments where practicable. One of the reasons why you've got higher costs where you wouldn't have expected them previously was because the costs have been shared across the district, regardless of what the actual cost of the infrastructure is for developing in different areas. So you're right, in the central city, normally you'd have some spare capacity from existing infrastructure if you were doing an infill or a brownfield site, whereas in a greenfield site you've got basically 100% of the infrastructure costs because you have to supply all of it. So that's one of the reasons why we're looking at the catchments, is to bring those costs down a bit lower. But as for your development forum question, anything that comes out of the development forum is going to be coming back through the strategy and planning committee for their decision on whether to action it or pursue any work around it.
There is a risk for us, in just sitting and doing nothing, waiting for the forum. So, given that these are clearly some directions from the LGA, we're certainly being encouraged by the LERP and by MB to go down this sort of route. We felt it was prudent, as long as the council were comfortable with it, for us to explore it. Again, you're not making any decisions at this point in terms of deciding to go down the sort of area, the finer grained area catchments, but we are, I guess we wanted some direction from you before we engaged a lot of work.
All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much. And now we move to the